Alright, I just got done watching Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. And let me tell you, okay? I've loved the Mission Impossible franchise. I love Fallout, Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation. Now, when it comes to the previous film, Dead Reckoning, I didn't love it as much as I wanted to be. Because, yes, there were a lot of aspects that did not work in that film. Now, when it comes to The Final Reckoning, I had some high hopes, because they've been branding this as the final Mission Impossible movie. So I kept thinking to myself, alright, if they're gonna end this right here, they better end it right. And after watching it, man, this film was so disappointing. Now, first of all, the first act of this film, because this film is a 3-hour film, alright, and it felt long. Okay, so let me start with the first act. The first act felt like a slog because the pacing throughout the first act was very slow. And here's the thing, there used to be a lot of action in the beginning of the film, and then when it translates to the opening title, it used to get your excitement up. After the main title comes in, you know that you are in for a ride. But in this film, when that moment happens, you're just kind of like, okay, duh. And for me, that is a really bad feeling going into this film, because the first act of this film is basically flashbacks and exposition dumping. And the way they do it, it's not sleek, it's not clean. Show us, don't just tell us. Now, in this film, all they just do is tell us, right? Through flashbacks, old sequences, replayed over and over and over again. It just gets tedious. The first act of this film is mostly just that. A lot of things getting thrown at you, especially tying everything up from the first Mission Impossible movie all the way to Dead Reckoning. So, going into this, just expect tons and tons of flashbacks. And yes, that really makes the first act of this film tedious. There are barely any action in the first act of this film, aside from 2 hand-to-hand combat sequences, which I enjoy quite a bit. And for me, those 2 action sequences are weirdly enough the best part of this film. And this film suffers the same problem that the Dead Reckoning suffered. And that is, I really don't think the plot of an AI called the Entity is the right plot for these 2 movies. And that's because with an AI as your plot, you're basically lacking up the villain aspect, because the motivation for the AI is just so simple. It's just to control the world, and that's it. And for me, as a Mission Impossible fan, I found it really like a really simplistic plot point, but also expected a lot of more of these villainous aspects of the AI. And the villain here is Gabriel. We meet again. It's just the same villain from Dead Reckoning, and in here, he is just as lame as he was in the Dead Reckoning film. I really expected a lot of character development for him, but he just acts like an NPC throughout the film, He is underdeveloped, he doesn't get much to do in the film, and especially when you compare it to the other villains that came before him, like Henry Cavill, Sean Harris in Rogue Nation, he really falls flat. He falls short when you compare it to the other Mission Impossible villains. So, the first act felt sluggish, and the second act, well, the action kicks in. But even when the action kicks in, for me, it failed to manage, the same high as Mission Impossible Fallout and also Rogue Nation, because the action in there were intense. And yes, there is specifically one intense action sequence on a plane. But as I was watching it, yes, the stunt work is good, and Tom Cruise risked all of his life to do that stunt, and I gotta appreciate it, because his dedication for these movies is limitless, right? And I do respect that. But as I was watching that scene on the theater, I felt something was off, and that is the intensity, the climax. This is supposed to be the climax of the film, but somehow you really don't feel that, because the villain really gets killed easily, very easily, and the whole scene, the whole plane sequence really didn't carry much weight. When you compare this to the climactic battle on a cliff in Fallout, it really falls down, falls apart. It has stakes, but something feels off, and you instantly know it. And yes, there are a lot of negatives in this film. I talked a lot of negatives in the beginning, but there are several positives also, and that is the action sequences. Yes, it may not reach the same high as the previous Mission Impossible movies, but it really does offer some neatly executed action sequences. For instance, the jeep chase and the mine, I thought that was pretty thrilling. As I mentioned before, the two close combat segments in the beginning of the movie, they are small, but they are really enough to get your excitement just a little bit, even though after those sequences happen, you're immediately faced up with a lot of exposition, a lot of flashbacks, and all those boring stuff. And it just felt wrong, calling a Mission Impossible movie boring, but that's what it is, especially the first act, because the second and the third act, the action really ramps up a little bit more, and yes, at least you get something exciting in the second and the third act. But even then, it really never reaches the same high that the other Mission Impossible movie. The second positive here is, the stunts. There are a lot of stunts in here, and I gotta appreciate every dedication that comes into the action, the stunts. It really feels like this is the most practical movie that I've seen in a long time, and that says a lot. And the cinematography, it's kind of okay. It's not as good looking as the other Mission Impossible movies, because there are a lot of, the film here is shot very normal when you compare it to the standards of the Mission Impossible movies. There are a lot of awful editing choices. There are a lot of cuts during fights and everything, and this is the stuff that you're not used to seeing in a Mission Impossible film. Whew, man, because this film, when you compare it to all the others, it really doesn't feel like it reaches up to the climactic segments, the climactic that this is gonna be the last one. You, as an audience, really do not feel that intensity, and I do think that basically is due to the lack of the character development of the villain, and also the choice of the plot, because AI What does it want to do? Alright? It just wants to control the world. And then it's just too basic for me. I wanted something more out of this. Yes, it offers a lot of action, a lot of thrilling moments, but that's just not enough. And the first act of this film is really badly paced. A lot of awful editing choices. I don't know why, man, because this really feels like a different movie. Two different movies chopped up into one. And it all just feels wrong. Particularly if this is intended to be the last Mission Impossible movie. And if that's the case, then what can I say? I was disappointed with this film. I expected a lot more. Don't get me wrong, from a filmmaking standpoint, the film was good. But good is not the standard for the last Mission Impossible movie. At least the standard is amazing. But this one is just a good Mission Impossible movie. And also, I do think out of all the others, this is my most unrewatchable Mission Impossible movie due to the pacing, due to the lack of action in the first act. And yes, I would just jump into Ghost Protocol, Fallout, Rogue Nation any day over this one. And I really did not expect that feeling of a letdown, of a disappointment that I really got from watching this film. So yes, those are my thoughts on Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. I do think it could be better paced, better executed, better written, and also if they've changed the plot and the villain, I think it could have been much better and much more enjoyable in the theater. So with all of that in mind, I will give Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning a 5 out of 10. And yes, if you ask me to rank all of the Mission Impossible from Ghost Protocol to this film, to The Final Reckoning, I would for sure put Final Reckoning at the bottom of the list. And it's just sad because this is supposed to be the final, right? So leave us with a bang, leave us wanting more out of this franchise. But this film did the opposite, because yes, if this is the last one, just please let it die. Alright? It pains me to say it, but that's the truth. So 5 out of 10. And if you have seen The Final Reckoning, what were the highlights? What are your favorite action set pieces that are thrown into this film? And what do you think about the ending? And the ending really leaves the door for more installments coming. And deep down, do you want it? Do you want more out of this? Or they should have just let it die with The Final Reckoning. Those are my thoughts. I know this is one of the more harsh reviews that I've worked on, but that is just the truth. I am very disappointed with this Final Reckoning film. So tell me everything you like, everything you do not like, and how does it feel? Does this feel like the fitting closure of the franchise, or entirely something else? Tell me everything down in the comment section, and see you on the next video.